So now we'd like to open up the group to questions that you may have, because we all have a wealth of knowledge that we provide, but we want it to be geared towards things that really matter to you and things that you have questions about.
So Ellen, someone wants to know, how do you suggest counseling for children suffering in a divorce if the parent is against counseling because maybe a past negative experience with it?
If both parents or one parent, or I don't know, two, I don't know.
One parent, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when one parent has an emotional concern for a child going through the process, it's very easy to create the forum for that child to be involved in counseling. The problem may occur when both parents are not in agreement that the child needs the counseling or would benefit from the counseling, and that's when things from our office's perspective can become a little murky, because, as Barbara probably will support, in order for us to be compliant with all the rules and regulations in my industry, both parents have to be in agreement that this child be involved in counseling unless one parent has custody or jurisdiction. It can be a kind of a difficult line to cross. We do everything we can to encourage the parent who may not be interested in supporting the counseling to come and visit with one of our trained therapists so that we can answer any questions about the counseling experience that may help that client learn that this could be a very positive experience versus what that client has experienced negatively in the past. So we try to create opportunities for both parents to be involved so that we can explain the process.
So as you can imagine, in a divorce situation where the parties aren't really talking to one another, you need two lawyers who are able to have that conversation, and then encourage the parties to have the conversation, focusing them on, do you have concerns for your child and what's in their best interest, so that we can usher them and channel them to the right place to get that help. The last thing you want is for your children to feel the effects of your divorce.
And certainly it's not unusual, using this example, if parents are at each other and not being cooperative, the parent who's so angry may resist the idea of counseling simply because the other parent wants it. It's not even necessarily thinking about the benefit to the child. You know, if she says, I want the counseling for Sally, just because she wants it, he may resist. So we sometimes have that opposition going on as well.
And there's a lot of paranoia too, like wondering why the person wants the child to go to the counselor. I mean, they might think they're trying to set them up to deprive the other of parenting rights, and so then they become resistant when the real focus should be on the health and well-being of the child himself.
So what starts off as perhaps a very simple issue to address can become extremely layered based on each partner's approach to one another.
Great. Barbara, this one's for you. Sort of changing gears a little bit at the beginning of the marriage, what's the best way to approach a potential spouse about a prenuptial agreement? And then following up, how do you get around the perception that you don't trust, sort of the trust issue that it presents right at the beginning?
I guess it depends on the circumstances. I mean, we have a lot of situations where people have been married before and they bring into this marriage some wealth and assets from a prior life before this new marriage, and a lot of times they have children from prior marriages that they want to protect. And so I think the easiest way to bridge that gap is that again, conversation and listening. Listening is a really good thing to understand why that person is perhaps suggesting that a prenup would be appropriate. I actually think that Ohio law is fairly good about protecting separate property of spouses, so that if you do the right things, keep your property separate and make sure that it's only utilized for things that you want it to be utilized for, that in the event of a divorce, you might come out of the divorce with your separate property intact. But I think that you just have to have that conversation about why. I mean, obviously you love each other, and a person easily can get an attitude that you're trying to, take away from our happy union something, or you're trying to set up for the eventuality of divorce. But I can tell you that I think it's a real constructive way to get into a marriage, because you have to have the conversation. So you're forced to deal with the issues up front as opposed to down the line.
Holly, this question is for you. The person is interested in traditional medicine as well as understanding alternative medicine and having that presented to them as an option. Do you foresee changes forthcoming in the medical industry as there are more baby boomers that want to take charge of their health? And do you foresee changes that the insurance companies will be paying for more of the alternative health options that are available to people?
No, I don't foresee the insurance companies or government paying for more. I only foresee it less, unfortunately. Let's be realistic, I think. However, I do see certainly a movement for people to take more charge of their health. And we've addressed that in so many different ways at the Cleveland Clinic. One of the things that we've done is to engage patients in their own health in terms of My Chart, so they have their own records, their list of medications, their problem list, what their future appointments are. I mean, when I started in practicing medicine, it always amazed me how a lot of people had more information about their car repair updates or even their pet health, and how the veterinarians were better at reminding people that when their pet needed their immunizations than humans. So we've made inroads in that regard. Another thing that we've unveiled, since it is a very complex health system to navigate, and I see it every day, even in people who are in the medical field who you would think would have an inside leg up about what they need and are still just as lost as the average person. One of the things that we've unveiled at our Center for Specialized Women's Health is custom fit physicals for women, where there is a patient navigator who works with the person to coordinate everything. So everything's done on one day, the records are reviewed, it's comprehensive and very preventive focused, and all of that is arranged. And we've really had a good outcome with that. And certainly the clinic has embraced integrative medicine in terms of acupuncture. We have a Chinese herbalist, we've got functional medicine, and so that is in part due to demand.
Barbara, emotions are very high and can obscure the collaborative process, as each party wants their way and only sees how they've been wronged, as you were talking about in your presentation. What steps do you suggest a couple take together individually to be able to focus on having a successful collaborative divorce?
Jen, do you want to talk about that?
I was half listening because I was running off. Maybe you start and let me read the question.
Sure.
Okay, well, obviously the collaborative process is the best place to do that kind of conversation, because it's a very choreographed process. The lawyers meet with their clients first, and then the lawyers actually meet with each other to create an agenda so that everybody knows what the topic is going to be in any given four-way meeting. All of the work is done in four-way meetings where the lawyers are present, hopefully with interdisciplinary people like financial neutrals or mental health neutrals who can help the communication going. So one of the things we do is at the very first meeting, we explore what the interests and goals of the parties are right up front. I joke about it, but I want to laminate it and put it in the middle of the table. I want to take pictures of your children and leave them right in the middle of the table so everyone can remember why you're here and why it's important. And then the professionals will actually, I think, help the parties form the conversation. We do talk about kitchen table discussion, and Jen, I don't know if there's something more you want to offer about that or about the question.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to piggyback on what you said about identifying the goals at the start of the case. If at ever during the course of the collaborative you reach an impasse, you go back to those initial goals and you redefine them and you make the parties state and reaffirm that that's where they want to be at the end. So you can redirect your conversations, and it's a nice system to have in play because you're always brought back to the beginning and you're always brought back to what they really wanted at the onset, not what things have evolved to throughout the course.
And there's bumps in the road. I mean, it's not just because we talk about this more open, collaborative approach. Don't think for a minute there isn't some disharmony and some, even aggression sometimes. There's cooling off periods within the process, and we sometimes break out to manage the emotion. But it's definitely a more healthy way to approach dealing with the issues.
This question is for Ellen. It's the individuals, a couple has been friends with another couple for about 25 years during their marriage, which ended after a 3-year legal battle. They love them both and want to remain friends with each of them as they adjust a single life. How should we reach out to them to help them with their respective adjustments, and what can we do to help them?
Yeah, this is always a challenging issue because when a couple has experienced the divorce, each partner wants their team in place, and it can be very difficult for a good friend to both parties to find ways to continue to demonstrate loyalty. It's a kind of a tough line for many individuals, and some feel so uncomfortable trying to be friends with both that they choose a side. And so I tell couples who are going through this process, if I have an opportunity to speak with both of them, that be aware that you may lose some very good friends who have been with you for a long time as a result of this separation, this final separation, because some people just can't find the comfort level to be able to manage ongoing relationships with both individuals. But I also tell partners in this relationship to try hard not to pressure their friends, to reach out in ways that allow them room to renegotiate their friendships with each party. That if you want them to be on your side, and that requirement means that you cannot talk to my ex-husband, you cannot ever have dinner with him, you cannot sit next to him at a ball game. If you make those pressured requirements, you're going to create a lot of discomfort for your friends, and you may lose that one in the process simply because he or she may feel that your demands are excessive. So it's important when you reach out to your friends who want to maintain relationships with both of you, that you leave them room to find a way to manage the friendship. And maybe as time goes on, it may even be possible for all of you to be breathing the same air at the same party. That eventually may be possible, where you can even be in the same room with your ex and your mutual friends. So there is a way, but it does take some time, and you have to be patient with people's negotiating their friendship with you as well.
And I think you have to give your friends, to kind of dovetail on that, you have to give your friends permission to be friendly with the other side, because they may see it as a sense of betrayal. I'm in a collaborative right now that so many interesting things have come out of it. But what you touched on, where past history can come rearing you right in the face. The wife told a story about how her mother, when her mother was divorcing her father, forbade the kids to have any contact with the father, and the father definitely stepped away from the family. And when it became time for the daughter to get married, he was not permitted to come to the wedding. Mother just absolutely prevented the father to come to the wedding. And later, mother passed away, and the father came to the funeral, and that was of his ex-wife. And that was the first time that my client, the daughter, had an opportunity to really re-engage with her father, and now has a wonderful relationship with her father. But it was all prevented by her mother, who felt like he was a bad person and shouldn't be involved in the lives of the children. I had a case also where I got a call from a referral source. Somebody said, you have to help this person. He's going to lose his children. He had 2 young children. We weren't in a formal collaborative, but we worked constructively with the other side. And we worked through a parenting plan where both parents were able to equally parent their children. despite my client's fear that he was going to lose custody, and that all his friends, everyone around him was fight, fight, fight for custody. But it's all kind of counterintuitive. And because he let go a little bit and was able to work through the problems, I got a call about a year or two later that everything is going famously, and the referral source called me back and said, we were, as friends, so wrong to tell our client, our friend to fight hard and, to battle over the children. And if it wasn't for your advice, he would not be where he is today with regard to his kids. So I think you really have to have these conversations with the people that are in your lives and figure out what everyone's new role is going to be. And friends mean well, but they often, aren't giving the right kind of support, right?
Right. And it is anticipated, again, that some people, you will become alienated from some people in your former life, because that's just the way the chips unfortunately fall. That's to be expected. But on the other hand, you will also be making new friends. And I realize old friends are not easily replaced, but that becomes, as we've all suggested, part of your ongoing recovery.
Okay, Holly, what's the most common physical problem you see when people get divorced, and what's the cure?
Cure.
Cure. That's a wonderful word.
Well, I think that there's pretty much almost any medical condition can get worse with stress. And some of the more common ones that I see would be insomnia, anxiety, depression, migraine headaches, alterations in weight, either up or down, trouble concentrating, and just a deterioration of whatever chronic medical problems that there might be, whether it's high blood pressure, diabetes, bowel disorders. So those are some of the most common ones. And basically trying to keep a routine in terms of regular sleep and regular exercise and good nutrition when anyone faces any type of a stressful life event is really key.
Okay, I think this question could be for both Ellen and Barbara. What do you do when a child refuses to see a parent because they don't feel safe? If the parent appears to need anger management counseling but is refusing, and the spouse and child left the home to protect themselves, and Child and Family Services have been notified.
Yeah, again, as I'm sure Barbara will agree, this becomes a very difficult issue. If there are safety issues, then under no circumstances, from our industry's perspective, ethically, legally, can we encourage those kinds of visits if if the child does not feel safe or protected. And once 696 kids are involved, if indeed either the therapist or the parent has made a call to the agency which protects children and keeps them safe, once that call is made, it's often out of our hands and even the custodial parent's hands to create visitation. The agency will investigate to determine if there are safety issues between that child and that parent. If there are safety issues and the parent does want to recreate a relationship with the minor child, if the parent is willing, we certainly encourage that parent to be involved in counseling and anger management strategies to help that parent more effectively and appropriately manage his anger that is perhaps leveled at the partner, but is being unloaded on the child. We do whatever we can to encourage that parent to participate in the counseling process so that the child develops a more trusting perspective. But we don't always get that opportunity. Of course, once an agency steps in and we recognize that there is harm.
So I also have to say that you have to kind of ferret out what is real safety issues and what are perceived safety issues, because parents get pretty clingy with their children once they're going through a divorce, and you're not really sure sometimes whether it's a real problem. Obviously, if there's a historical problem, you have to deal with it. And the county it isn't very good in terms of providing facilities for supervised visitation. So a lot of times you have to depend on people close to you that you trust that can act as the intermediary and be present in this situation. And the studies show that it's better to have a relationship even with bad parents than no relationship at all, I think. But obviously, if it's a real safety issue, you want to make sure that the child's comfortable and not being put in a situation that's going to cause more stress and health problems on the child.
Right, and we also, as Barbara is saying, we also recognize that one parent may actually manufacture concerns for the child throughout a contentious divorce process and may plant seeds alienating that child from that parent. Of course, that's parental alienation syndrome, and that is very, very difficult to assess, because an angry parent who has a lot of time handling a particular child more than the other parent has many opportunities and can be very controlling and powerful in terms of influencing the child's reaction to the opposite parent. So as Barbara said, we have to be very careful to make sure that the threat is real, or is it one that's been created and manipulated by a parent who wants to have control. And of course, if it's the latter case, that can be quite destructive.
Okay, Barbara, just to follow up on that, in a case where safety may be an issue, would that case be a candidate for a collaborative?
So there's been a lot of conversation about domestic violence issues and its place in mediation and alternative processes. And when I first started as a mediator a long time ago, the answer to that was no. You do not put people that are in possible unsafe situations into a room together. But the thinking has evolved about that now. And I think that with people trained in high conflict management, that there are ways to have people in the same room and working together to get a resolution. And there are ways probably to protect children in the situation. A case of domestic violence in particular, the perpetrator of it may act out a lot to the adult, to the other spouse, but really not be a threat to the children themselves. And they can differentiate, I think, between their anger or their focus. So there's a lot on domestic violence and making sure that parties and children are safe in the situations you're putting them into.
Holly, if you have a family member that's, for example, lost a ton of weight during your divorce and is concerned that they've increased their smoking, how can they help them?
Well, I think it's very important to make sure that they're getting regular medical care by someone who's aware of what's going on in their life. And anyone who is a smoker or a drinker who loses a lot of weight, malignancy, cancer, has to actually be ruled out. In people that otherwise have healthy habits who lose weight, that's a little bit more likely to be stress and depression, other than a more life-threatening underlying disorder. One of the things that I wanted to briefly go over is a mnemonic called STRESS, and it was in one of our health tips that people who get our monthly health tip and free newsletter from Speaking of Women's Health. And this was written by one of my partners who does the custom fit physicals with me. And the acronym STRESS, S stands for sleep. It is so critical to get at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Prior to electricity, we got about 10 hours of sleep. So put that iPad and cell phone away and get sleep. Avoid caffeine after 2 p.m. I already had my morning Java. And there is definitely help for sleep disorders. We have an excellent sleep center. T stands for talk it out. We've heard that, and how important talking and people being heard, and not just only talking at people, but really being heard. E stands for both exercise and eat right. They're equally important. Folks should get regular exercise. It's stress reducing, and not just aerobic, but also weight bearing and weightlifting activity. S stands for a sense of control and not being afraid to say, no, I've had enough, or I need to step away from things. Now, if we're talking about the last S, what do you think that might be, especially you men? Sex. Yeah, it also is good for women too. And obviously if someone's in the middle of a breakup, they're probably not having a regular sexual relationship necessarily. But certainly it is good for well-being. It's physical exercise. It's good for the immunity. But we certainly don't want people to be acting out sexually, which a lot of times we see, and there's risk for some significant sexually transmitted infections. So I think it's very important to identify the warning signs of stress, which rapid changes in weight is one of the big ones. Use of more alcohol, caffeine, tobacco. Anytime you see a loved one doing that, it's important, and they really might need, like a family intervention to get them to the right health care.
What does ER stand for? I think I skipped the R.
Oh, did I skip the R? Oh, I did. I'm sorry. I need more of this in my life. Rest and relaxation. That's what the R stands for. And so, a lot of times we wear lots of different hats. And where are you going to find even just that 10-minute time for yourself to refresh, to meditate, to do a special hobby, just to invest time in yourself? And along that 10-minute time period, one of my best tips to patients, and it's actually in the Cleveland Clinic Guide to Sleep, which was written by Dr. Fulveri. I've written the Cleveland Clinic Guide to Menopause, and I have my book here. But on sleep tips, to have a 10-minute worry period. Okay, that's the reverse of meditation. Because if you don't chew the fat in your brain about what it is that would worry you, when you do wake up because you have to go to the bathroom or there's normal sleep cycles where you do get closer to consciousness, then your brain is going to be fixated on that stuff. So what I personally do, and of course you don't want your worry period right before sleep, and you don't want to worry all day. So I always tell my patients, start off your day, the first thing you do in the morning is 10 minutes of worry. Exactly. So for me personally, it's my schedule. I'm so overbooked. I would wake up in a cold sweat. Oh, I forgot to be there at this conference this morning. So I just look at my calendar.
I worried about that this morning too.
And for some people it's finance, or obviously divorce, or their children, or their work issues. I mean, everybody has a burden that they're carrying. And I think that one of the reasons why, I don't know if you've seen the Cleveland Clinic Empathy video that has had millions of hits on YouTube, on the YouTube video channel, is it goes with the people that you're approaching, you don't really know what burden that they're personally carrying. And so I think having that kind of awareness, because we all are carrying things. E is for equally important: eat, exercise, and eat a healthy diet. Because when you're under stress, your body has a lot more stress hormones, more cortisol, which is what keeps the weight around the belly, which weight. We all need to be moving more and sitting less. I don't know how many of you have pedometers, but really all of us need a minimum of 10,000 steps a day. Thanks to my employer for tracking me in terms of how much I'm walking. But it is important to kind of do that. Some people will journal what they eat and how often that they exercise, and that's kind of their 10 minutes of time that they're taking for themselves to really put that first and foremost. But one of the messages that we have to get out, especially to our female patients, is they're socialized to take care of everyone else, their family, their community, and yet they put themselves last. And then, they just are on a downward spiral because of that.
And it's even worse in a divorce when you become a single parent and you don't have all the help in the house that you might have had before.
And I would think that this acronym is good for any of us, whatever you're going through. So these are important tips.
And you can get all of them for free. Any of you, just sign up on speakingwomen'shealth.com. We'll send them to you once a month.
Ellen, when a young couple that is married and one of the spouses has experienced divorce as a child, so maybe has some baggage or some conceptions, and his family are very ineffectual communicators, and that is funneled down into their marriage, this person would like to know, is it ever appropriate to call out his family about their lack of communication and how it's affecting their current family life?
Well, that would certainly require the cooperation of a mom and dad and maybe grandparents who don't necessarily want to come to the counseling office with a couple. But I think it's important, first of all, what I'm seeing in our office is we are seeing more young couples prior to signing the marriage documents come to the office for counseling, actually before they walk down the aisle. And this is very encouraging from a therapeutic perspective, because so many couples who are planning a wedding and have stars in their eyes and have identified a few of the problems with the partnership, they're thinking, oh wow, once we get married, everything will change and he'll behave himself and, she won't annoy me and, life will be grand and we just, it will just happen. And this is sort of this magical fantasy tour that most young couples experience because they're just thinking about, the moment with the dress and the party and they don't want to spend any serious time contemplating some of the concerns, because that's very anti-wedding. So I'm very encouraged to see that couples are identifying and defining problems prior to walking down that aisle. It gives them a lot better chance, in my view. It increases the odds that they will be successful in identifying any problems between them, including what may be poor communication on one individual's part because of upbringing, because of experience with families where there was not a lot of emotional discussion. And for a young couple who is still forming, coming to counseling to find ways to break some of those patterns that have been part of an individual's history, it can be very exciting because they are learning new languages that have not been part of their repertoire. And I also explained to an individual who perhaps is a product, a grown-up who perhaps is a product of childhood divorce, that this union is completely different from the union that he grew up with. That just because his parents did not communicate or experienced unhealthy patterns between them does not mean that he is automatically going to repeat those bad dance steps. That this is a new relationship, he is a different person, he's with a different person than his mother or his father, and this is an opportunity, assuming both partners are engaged and committed and loving, this is an opportunity to create new constructive patterns. So the step is really to get them into the office so we can, we can create these learning curves.
Do you ever have couples that come for annual mental health checkups, like you would go to a physician?
Yes, absolutely. and I said, there's not such a stigma anymore, in terms of the counseling situation. I mean, when I started this work many decades ago, it was even rare to see a male come into the office, without a disguise on, because he didn't want anybody to see him in the lobby. But I'm, again, so encouraged that seeking mental health advice to improve your life, because as my respected colleagues have said, we all come to the table with stuff. Nobody's immune from life's burdens, and I think it's a wonderful step that couples can now they actually initiate coming to a counseling office rather than being, yanked and pulled because they're so reluctant and they don't think that they can, experience the help. So yes, we do see couples who come for, regular, biannual checkups.
Okay, Barbara, sort of continuing on the extended family, what about grandparents' rights in divorce? How do you schedule that? Is it normally with the spouse's visitation, or can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So in a juvenile context, there's a statute in Ohio that allows for grandparents to have visitation rights with regard to deceased children. So if your child should unfortunately have passed away and you don't have that open opportunity to see your grandchildren because your child is gone, the law protects grandparent rights there. In a divorce context, it's a little bit different. There is a statute with regard to shared parenting that says if there's important people in a child's life who have been, there all the time and very involved, that there's a chance for being able to infuse some grandparent rights in a court order. I recently had a case where my client, first time this ever happened, was actually incarcerated for not too nice of a thing, but the grandparents and the aunt and extended family had a really healthy relationship with the children. They all lived in the same community, and they were completely blocked by the wife, who was angry about the incarceration and what happened, from seeing their kids. And so I represented the grandparents in the divorce case because that was the best I was going to do. I wasn't going to get any custody rights for this guy at that point because he was in jail, but I was able to work on those rights. But overall, I have to tell you that grandparents don't have direct rights under the law with the courts. It's up to, the attitude is that we're going to let parents be who they are and make decisions for their own children. And so when we write parenting plans, if it's important to the parties, like in a more collaborative approach where everyone recognizes that the grandparents and extended family are important, we can write in permission or preclusions too. But for the most part, you don't get grandparent rights unless your children think you're an appropriate person to be in the child's life.
Okay, Holly. Do you find that there are patients that are going through a divorce that are often reluctant to seek treatment for maybe specific issues that they may be going through because of the impact it may have on their divorce? And then how do you encourage them to do that?
What I see more often is that people are just so overwhelmed that they're almost like paralyzed and not able to act. So being able to have an advocate or a navigator to be able to help guide that person about what they need to do to be healthy or get healthy or stay healthy is very, very important. And that our health system is so complex, and some people are very much worried about what their coverage is going to be, especially that health insurance can change based on what their status is or work status. And so that's one of the things that I like to encourage people to be proactive and to make sure they get things in, especially once they've met their health deductible, which we're going to continue to see that increase. And we're going to see much more of a focus, I think, on consumerism, which I think is very good. And there's going to be, I think, a lot more price transparency in the medical field, so people can easily look on an app and find out where the cheapest place to get that MRI is. Now, maybe they don't need an MRI of their head, it's stress headaches they're having, but if they do need that or blood work, I think there's going to be a lot more cost shopping in comparison, like we do in other areas where we spend our money.
Right. And jumping on that point, what I see occasionally is that individuals who are suffering psychologically and may require a visit to the psychiatrist's office to consider some kind of a mood medication to deal with depression and anxiety, that client who may be in the middle of a divorce may decide against that recommendation because the concern is that, oh my goodness, what if the lawyer on the other side, finds that I'm suffering from depression or anxiety? How will that affect my status as the guardian of my children? And that is certainly of concern for us who like to do our very best to utilize every resource to help a client manage effectively.
Although that is protected, there's really strong HIPAA laws.
Absolutely.
So. And I deal with that. People have anxiety when they see their records online, and I can understand with all the breaches on healthcare.gov site that people would have concerns about their personal information. But in terms of what we do at the clinic and with our electronic medical record system, it's not accessible. I mean, it's very, very secure.
Okay, Barbara, how does a court identify dishonest testimony when there's no discovery on a particular issue? And maybe you can talk about that also in the context of the role of honesty in a collaborative divorce.
Well, as collaborative professionals, we sign a contract with the clients that we're going to stay true to the process, and at the end, if the process does not complete or any party wants to jump out of it, the lawyers actually cannot proceed to court. And so our pledge as collaborative counsel is to be transparent and forthcoming, and this is an amazing thing, but actually correct the mistakes of our opposing counsel as opposed to riding on the bandwagon of their mistakes. So it's, again, it's just a much fairer, constructive process. As far as the courts themselves, I mean, that's what you do in court. You leave the judgment up to the judge to decide the weight and credibility of the evidence, and no one should be going to court without discovery. I've had a case where I was forced to, and it's not very comfortable because you need information to be able to prove your case. So I guess you have to just try to discredit the witness so that the judge or the trier sees it. I just can't stress again the importance of transparency and forthcomingness. People are untrusting at the point where they're reaching a divorce. I mean, they trusted and loved this person for sometimes 50 years, and all of a sudden something has created a lack of trust. And the only way to get that back is with building blocks that slowly show you're telling the truth and that you're working in a constructive way. So hopefully that's an answer to the concern.
Barbara, in other states, often a couple needs to be separated for a year before they can file for divorce. Do you see this happening anytime soon in the state of Ohio?
Actually, we're going the other way. There used to be one ground, there still is a ground for divorce where you've been separate and apart for more than a year, and then the court had the jurisdiction to grant the divorce, and that was years ago, and it still exists as a ground, but the courts have lessened the grounds in Ohio for the ability to divorce, and now the most liberal ground is incompatibility, which I'm sure Ellen can testify. Do you see healthy couples that are incompatible?
Oh, absolutely. and certainly, you know, incompatibility by itself is not necessarily a reason to ring the divorce bell. You know, it's important, but if the incompatibility is across the board and there's not much common ground that partners can share with one another, that may be an indicator that the relationship is not solid and working anymore.
So to answer the question, I think that the Ohio's concern is just you don't make knee-jerk reactions like you have a fight one night and you can just march in and get divorced. So with a dissolution of marriage, there's a 30-day waiting period where you work all your agreements up front and you submit them to the court with a petition to ask for your marriage to be dissolved, and the court requires in regular dissolutions a waiting period of 30 days, and under local rule it's actually a 42-day wait generally. There's a new statute now that tags to the collaborative process, and the rule is being formulated as we speak in Cuyahoga County, whether the total 30-day waiting period can be waived in a collaborative situation where people were adult enough to work through a formal process and come up with a resolution. I think the courts are feeling and the legislatures are feeling a little bit more comfortable that it's not a knee-jerk reaction, and therefore they're allowing people to proceed without any kind of waiting period.
Okay, Barbara, how does a court decide when to increase child support often? And then with the caveat that the non-custodial parent often doesn't consistently exercise their parenting time and or moved out of state.
Ian, why don't you talk about that? You have a lot of experience with that.
Well, I mean, the simple answer is that there has to be a 10% change in the party's income, but oftentimes, I mean, child support can be as simplistic as Ohio has a child support worksheet, and if the family's total income is under $150,000, you put the numbers in the worksheet, and there are other categories that go in it, and it spits out a number. Oftentimes, though, families' lives are more complicated than that, and sometimes children have special needs, and so it can be It may not be as easy as just putting the numbers in the worksheet, or if the family earns over $150,000. So it's really case specific. It's difficult to just answer that question, but certainly travel out of the expense, a potential expense of traveling out of state for the child is a factor to consider for child support, and it may not increase the child support. The parent that moved out of state may get some recognition if they're paying all of the costs for the child to see that other parent. So it can be, I think, it's not a yes or no answer in terms of when child support, but certainly we are all very well versed in the issues of child support and the current trends, and could help answer that question on a case-by-case basis. Okay, so on that point, kind of following up, how are college expenses divided after the children turn 18 and emancipate when there's no order in place to address those expenses?
So Jen, do you want to talk about the collaborative approach and how we deal with college expenses?
Sure. So the traditional approach in the court is that the court has no jurisdiction to order any parent to do anything financially for a child once the child is emancipated. And the age of emancipation under the statute is needs to be 18 years old or 18 and graduated from high school. So essentially they want to get you through that high school period, and then a parent's obligation ceases in the court side. However, once again, the beauty of the collaborative is identifying the goals and interests and really crafting your own outcome. So in a collaborative case, the parents have a goal of seeing that they pay for their child's education, that that their children aren't burdened with college loans. They can agree to pay in some way by some division of expenses for the children to go to college. Once you solidify those agreements in a shared parenting plan or a separation agreement, you have to understand and counsel your client, though, that it's very difficult to modify those after the fact, because now you and the clients are contracting to do something once past the age of emancipation. So again, going back to what the court has the discretion to do, they can't modify that after the fact. You've contracted to do it and you're bound by it. So if one party all of a sudden has lost their job and doesn't have the resources to pay for whatever portion they've agreed to up front, the other spouse doesn't have the ability to sort of call that person out on it and say, no, you've obligated yourself to do it and now you can't change it. So college is a hot button for sure in all of these cases, whether litigated or collaborative.
And that's why the interest-based approach is so important, because one spouse may want to retain money and the other spouse may have an interest in making sure that kids get through college, and if you match up your interests and goals, you can compromise to make sure that one party doesn't feel an excess burden and the other party has their goals for their children met. So I can't stress enough how being creative in these solutions is so much better to an outcome than kind of the cookie cutter approach that the law kind of gives a lot of restrictions to.
Does a parent's move out of state suggest to the court an avoidance to participate in the child's care or lives? So if a parent moves out of state, does that telegraph to the court that they are not involved in the child's life?
My short answer to that is no. We're a pretty mobile society now, and I think the trend is sort of the other way. We're trying to fashion age-driven parenting plans so that children of young years aren't treated the same as maybe more mature, older children, and we're trying to create, and I think the courts are creating rules for parenting by a distance. So I think all three of our experiences is that that isn't a stigma. It's just a reality.
And you know, I have a number of growing cases in which a parent does move out of state. And you know a lot more about what impresses the court, but from my view, I think it's really up to that parent who is relocating to continue to demonstrate consistently an interest in being involved. And if that parent does not show up for extended vacations or retrieve the child for, summer visitation, that, I think, demonstrates to the children and the court that the parent has reduced involvement. So I certainly encourage such a parent to, even if you can't be there every night to tuck the child in, that you make sure you honor the time that you have created between you and your child if you're far away.
And finally, Barbara, what's your experience with clients 3 to 5 years post-divorce or dissolution? Do you know how they're doing, and do you get feedback?
I occasionally get some feedback, and it's always nice to know how people are doing. I often say to clients that are coming in on the first interview and kind of nervous about taking the next step, I haven't really ever had a client come back to me and say, I wish I hadn't done this. Mostly it's, I wish I had done it sooner. So I think that, the people that I remember being on Euclid Avenue one day, and a client who I couldn't see who it was came running towards me excited to tell me how everything was great now and I was so right. I'm not so right, but the point is that you can have a next life. I joke a little bit, maybe we conclude with this, but when God created marriage, it was when people got married at age 14 and were probably passed away at 30. And it's really a challenge. You have to work on it all the time, and there's, thank goodness, ways that you can work through problems. But we see people that are married and divorced 4 and 5 times just because you live a long time and you got to learn how to live with people. So on that note, we're all here to help whoever who might need help in doing this in a more creative and healthy way. And we thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you so much.